Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Ultimate Sega CD review here on Player One Start. In the previous videos in this series, we went through the history and development of this console, and the hardware and graphics and sound. In the last videos, we took a look at the launch games and some of the enhanced cartridges as the genre was defined by Sega. In this video, we're going to take a look at the games that the Sega CD is probably the best known for better or for worse, and that is the FMV, or full motion video games. These games are probably remembered best today as being the gimmick that sold the Sega CD. Full motion video on a game console was not really widely accepted or even widely known about until this happened. Most people's experience with this would most likely have been on the Sega CD first, and possibly those that had the higher upgraded PCs that actually had a CD-ROM drive, number one, but also PCs that could display full motion video back in 1992 were few and far between. So consumers seeing this on their television through a game console back at that time would have been the cutting edge of technology back then. And Sega's marketing team was not shy about touting this feature as the reason to get a Sega CD back in the day. However, a lot of people have found out that a lot of these games are not that good. However, my question is going to be, are they all bad, or were they just misused because of the gimmick to sell games? So as is tradition, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these games before taking a deep dive into a few of them. Microcosm is a 3D rail shooter video game developed and published by Psygnosis in 1993. This game featured realistic FMV animation, with the graphics being rendered on Silicon Graphics workstations. The Sega CD port of this game features a third-person perspective. The game's plot is set in the future, where two evil conglomerate corporations battle for supremacy. The player in this game takes control of a microscopic submarine that is sent to destroy enemy microscopic droids in their corporation's president. To do this, you start out the game by being injected into the bloodstream of the president, and then you just go around shooting all the other enemies around you. Even by today's standards, I would say this is a strange concept for a game, but the game is actually not too bad. The graphics and sound alone should be enough to take you back to the early 90s, and although some would feel that the gameplay only offers just about the same as every other rail shooter out there, I feel that average does not make a bad game. So I would rate this at around the lower B, upper C range of a game, and for those of you looking to expand your Sega CD library, I don't think you'll be too disappointed in this one. Now here's a strange video game. This is a game based on the R-rated movie Bram Stoker's Dracula. And strangely, this isn't the only platform that this game came out on. However, the Sega CD version is a bit unique. This game makes use of fully digitized backgrounds that are pre-rendered and then shown on screen, making this about the only FMV platformer I can find on this system. By stepping forward, it moves the video forward. By stepping back, it does the reverse. The game consists of 7 stages based on the movie, complete with full motion video cutscenes of the movie in between. Based on the gameplay alone, this game is, it's not that great. The gameplay is stale and repetitive, and it really feels like that the game developers focused on dazzling the player with full motion video sequences and graphics, and even those don't look too impressive, so I wouldn't recommend this game for everyone, but if you are going for a complete collection, it's not going to break the bank to get it.
Emergency. Bogies approaching. All interceptors scramble now. Repeat. Bogies. All interceptors scramble immediately.
Alright, let's see if I can get this right this time. Silpheed is a video game developed by Game Arts, and it made its debut in the Japanese PC market in the mid-80s. Silpheed is the name of the spacecraft the player controls. This game itself is a vertical scrolling shooter. Like many shooter games, the story revolves around using the Silpheed as Earth's last defense to save itself from destruction by a powerful enemy invasion. This game is unique because it uses polygon-rendered ships over pre-rendered video backgrounds. Upon its release, this game received very positive reviews, stating that it is a simple shooter, but the gameplay is very solid. And critics especially noted that the video backgrounds were probably the most stunning visuals in a video game to date. Some criticisms were the unimpressive bosses, mediocre power-ups, and especially the lack of interaction with the backgrounds as some of the game's biggest problems. However, I say this game is pretty solid and holds up a bit well today. If you're looking for some of the early polygon shooters, this would be one that I would suggest getting.
It is a period of civil war. Rebel spaceships striking from a hidden base.
Star Wars Rebel Assault is a rail shooter video game developed and published by LucasArts for a variety of systems including the Sega CD. As stated in the title, it is set in the Star Wars universe and is the first CD-ROM only game to be published by LucasArts. The game's story focuses on a young pilot called Rookie One, as they are trained by, and subsequently fights for, the Rebel Alliance in the Galactic Civil War. The game features digitized footage and music from the original movies, although most of the original footage is replaced by CGI rendered sequences and full speech. The game makes extensive use of pre-rendered 3D graphics that were far ahead of what contemporary PCs and game consoles could render in real time. Developers would pre-render various environments, and the player must battle their way through them. This game was a huge commercial success for LucasArts. Critics praised the graphics and the soundtrack, however, they were very critical of the lack of replay value and the fact that a lot of the game environments were randomly thrown in and required the player to have knowledge of the movies. It was the Sega CD version, though, that received the brunt of all the criticism, as the graphics were a lot less sharp on this system, and the controls were seen as an inhibitance to gameplay. I do find the controls to be very wonky, however, I am a fan of Star Wars, so I think that's what drew me to this game. It did provide me with a little bit of fun, however, after about 15 to 20 minutes, I got tired of it very quickly. So just be aware that I don't think this title is one of the better ones to collect, and may only be for those hardcore fans of the Star Wars movies.
It is 2500 AD. Humans, after a long period of peace and prosperity.
AX101 is a rail shooter FMV video game for the Sega CD released in 1994. And this game I'm going to mark just slightly below average. I didn't care for the sound effects in this game, so I ended up turning the sound down while playing it, and the visual presentation isn't really inspired. But what I think this game really suffers from is that it is incredibly short, with many reviews noting that it takes less than 30 minutes to beat the game on the normal mode. Others have also noted that the faceless characters and basically non-existent plot doesn't really leave a lot for the player to relate to in this game. So again, I think the people that will enjoy this are going to be the hardcore collector crowd and not the casual collectors.
We did it, Captain! Hey, that was a piece of cake!
Don't let it go to your head, Bob. Remember, one slip and we're done for.
15 years after it had sealed itself off, humankind returned to the daylight.
Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, the Second Cataclysm, is a video game made by Rocket Science Games and based on the comic book Xenozoic Tales. The game was first released for the Sega CD before being ported to the PC. This game is nothing like the first version created by Capcom, which was a beat-em-up game in the arcades. This game is more of a rail shooter, featuring full-motion video especially created for the game. An interesting tidbit about this game is that Elon Musk supposedly worked as a programmer on this game. Critics of the time praised the graphics, but again stated that the gameplay and the theme of the game wasn't very thrilling, remarking that there wasn't much to do here but shoot and steer. And that was my experience as well. This game was kind of a neat concept, but didn't hold my interest very long once I started playing, so unless it's absolutely necessary for you to get all of them, I would give this game a pass. Novastorm is a rail shooter video game developed by Psygnosis in 1994. This game takes place sometime in the distant future, as seems to be the trend with a lot of these games. The player takes control over a spacecraft in 4 different environments. Each level ends with a boss fight which the player must complete to proceed. During the course of each level, the player gets attacked by groups of enemies. Taking out every enemy in a particular group produces a token of bronze, silver, and gold. These tokens are used like credits to obtain power-ups, and upon picking one, the power-up bar at the bottom of the screen moves along by differing amounts depending on the color of the token. At the time of this game's release, critics gave the game a mixed review, stating that even though the graphics were very impressive despite the low resolution and lack of full color, but the gameplay was overly easy, lacking in intensity, and the game could easily be finished in a standard 2-day rental, which is what I would recommend as well. It's not necessarily a waste of time, but it's not going to hold your attention for very long, and because the video doesn't change with each playthrough, there is no real replay value. Alright, one last rail shooter game that I'm going to point out here is Starblade. This game was developed and published by Namco, originally in arcades in 1991. Upon its release in arcades, it was praised for its 3D graphics and cinematic presentation. It is often cited as an important and influential game in 3D video games, serving as the inspiration for games such as Star Fox, Panzer Dragoon, and Rez. However, the home ports, including the Sega CD version, was criticized for not expanding much beyond the original arcade game and for their low replay value. However, in my personal opinion, I think this is one of the better rail shooters that were released for the Sega CD, especially since I can tell the influences it had on games like Star Fox. I would definitely say this one is worth a try. One last game we're going to take a deep dive into is Tomcat Alley. This is another interactive movie FMV video game developed by Code Monkeys for the Sega CD. It was the first Sega CD game to feature extensive full-screen, full-motion video. In this game, the player controls a United States Navy pilot who has to bring peace and stability to the world after the cash-poor former Soviet Union sold off some of its military equipment to an unfriendly government. The game itself takes place in a first-person perspective, and the player has to move quickly to launch missiles at enemy aircraft. I will state that this game is designed just like most of the other full-motion video games, where well-timed moves have to be made, and it's not really different with each playthrough because of the static nature of full-motion video. But the main exception with this game is that it seems to execute that gameplay element much better, especially when compared to a lot of the other games on the Sega CD. This game was very well reviewed and received upon the time of its release, mainly for its stunning visuals, but also that the core gameplay element was done very well. I would definitely recommend trying out this game if you have a Sega CD.
Make sure he's not on our tail. I've got him. He's gonna fire.
And I'm going to go ahead and group together these games that all rely on reflexes, basically because they all have different concepts but all share the same gameplay style. All of these games offer an arcade-style gameplay that was unique in the 90s but now has become severely dated. The shock and awe was supposed to be the full-motion video, and today it just doesn't look that good. So unfortunately, I don't think I would recommend any of these games today because of that, with the exception of games like Dragon's Lair because of its iconic status in video game history, but I don't find the gameplay of this fun. Really, I think the only game I could compare this to is the Simon game, where you just press up, right, down, and left in a repeated pattern. The only difference between Simon and these games is the time limit. I'm also going to throw in games like Prize Fighter and Supreme Warrior because they're pretty much relying on that same gimmick. And not only that, it's not well executed. I always get my butt handed to me in those games because I just don't know exactly what I can do to interact with the static content. I did find games like Ground Zero Texas a little bit more enjoyable because I did feel like I was interacting with the content a little bit more, but I didn't find the gameplay very fun. So yeah, titles like these are what I would say gave the Sega CD its bad reputation, with having a whole bunch of junk titles that were very gimmicky. I'm just going to state for the record that the only reason why I collected these games is because I knew I was going to be doing a review like this. Otherwise, I don't think I would have wasted my money on them. Some games I'm leaving out of this review are the light gun shooter games that I've already covered in my Is the Sega Minister Worth It? Part 2. It's strange to think that the Sega CD supported the Sega Minister light gun accessory more than the Sega Genesis by itself did. So if you want to see me review games like Mad Dog McCree and Who Shot Johnny Rock, as well as Corpse Killer and Crime Patrol, I would recommend that video after you're done viewing this one. Alright, so what are my thoughts on the full-motion video games that came out for the Sega CD? Well, let's start with the positives first. I think that these games are best suited to on-rail shooter games. And it may be my personal preference, but I think these games really showcase the graphics better. This is a game where only the on-screen enemies really need to be interactive, the backgrounds just need to look impressive. And in games like Silpheed, this game is phenomenal. It actually looks like a lot of these graphics, since they're still that early polygon type, it looks like they could have been rendered on the Genesis. Microcosm is another game I'll point out as being a game that is fun. It's not the most advanced game, and yes, it's not the best on-rail shooter game. It does provide an ample amount of entertainment for what it is. It would have been a good weekend rental, and it's not too ambitious for what it was trying to accomplish. It was just trying to be a shooter on the Sega CD. So on-rail shooter games, I think, use this very well. Another type of game I think I would recommend for those of you, especially the ones that like the arcade-type games that used full motion video back in the 80s, games like Dragon's Lair and Space Ace, all of these games were designed with Laserdisc in mind back in the 80s, and this would have been the first time to play these games exactly the way they were in the arcade in the home. And because most of these games use hand-drawn animation, I think they look better on the Sega CD than some of the full motion video that tried to use live action. However, my personal opinion is that I'm not really a big fan of those games, mainly because it's just a memorization trick of which button do you press at which time, and it's more of a reflex challenge than anything. But again, you can't deny these games' status in video game history, and they're definitely an iconic piece of that time frame. Alright, now for the most commonly used things. How about the live action games that you just interact with? Well, again, you have more of those shooter games that I've mentioned before, but you also have games that are kind of like Dragon's Lair, and I don't think those games are very fun at all. I personally don't like games like Double Switch and Night Trap. Those games are just infuriating as a game concept. As a cheap horror movie for Night Trap, yeah, that provides some entertainment. I would actually prefer watching someone play through it than playing through it myself. The Sega CD of this version is very unforgiving. It gives you no hints about what you're supposed to do, and you're just supposed to spend a lot of time in the game. I'm assuming that was where you got your gameplay value out of it. It would take you a long time to figure out the random patterns, it seems like, because they couldn't store enough video on that to give you more than a 20 or 30 minute playthrough. And once you've beaten it, or if you decide to beat it, the game becomes really obsolete within 20 minutes of getting it. So I will kind of stray you away from those types of titles. Yes, the Make My Video games that they had out there, those are also a gimmick. I played them for maybe 10-15 minutes, got a good laugh out of the nostalgia of this is what entertainment was in the early 90s, and then I quickly moved on. So it sounds like I'm knocking full motion video games, but I really think it's just like every other game genre. Some are going to be better than others, and if you're instantly turned off by the low pixel quality of the video, I don't think you're going to enjoy this at all. But if that doesn't bother you, or you really like getting into a game, I think some of these can be fun. I want to say some of my favorites were Silpheed, Starblade, because those are just well-designed game concepts. But anyway, that is just my opinion. What do you think of the Sega CD full motion video games? If you tried any of them out, or if you have any opinions about what you saw today in the show, please leave a comment below. I'd really like to see what you think about it. But anyway, that about wraps it up for this video. In the next part, we're actually going to wrap up the Sega CD by taking a look at one last game genre that aren't really video games at all, and we're going to talk about the legacy of the Sega CD and what it's like to collect for it today. So stay tuned for that video. As always, if you like what you see, please give this video a thumbs up. As always, leave a comment below. Let me know what you liked about today's video. Let me know what you'd like to see in the future. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned because I have more content coming. I'll see you all in the next one. If you like this video and you'd like to help out with future projects on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Also, if you enjoy the content of this channel, please remember to click on the subscribe button. Again, I want to thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.